So, with the advent of video game, movie, or show tie-ins becoming more and more prevalent, people are starting to kind of get more into these adaptations, even though when they first started off, like back in the 90s, to say they weren't that great would be a little bit of an understatement. I mean, sure, Mortal Kombat is fun and all, the first one at least, not the second one, but I mean, let's be honest here, video game tie-ins have not been really amazing. There are ones that I own and that I absolutely love, but I'm not going to stand up in a group of people and say, this movie is amazing! No, like, some of these movies, I have fun watching them, but objectively, they're kind of trash. Case in point, the Resident Evil films. I now have to specify the good ones, not the shitty one. Admittedly, those aren't great, but at least they aren't Welcome to Raccoon City. And when looking at video game adaptations, whether that be movies or now television shows, the question kind of is, how faithful is this to the original source material? And a lot of people kind of get it wrong. Case in point, a lot of people were saying that The Last of Us was a masterpiece, and all you need to do is watch a side-by-side scene comparison of a scene from one, which is like top-tier quality, amazing, and then the other, which is a poor imitation of them trying to capture what made this so amazing. Hint, this is not the TV series. So, in order to get a true bearing on if these are good or not, you have to kind of go to the fans. How is it in the eyes of the fans? Because sure, a non-fan who's coming into it fresh can look at it from a fresh pair of eyes and go, yeah, that was okay. But how does a fan feel about it? And surprisingly, I've been seeing a lot of division on this show with the fans. But not the typical division that you see where diehard fans just absolutely hate it and a bunch of like political activists are saying, no, it's amazing, you're wrong, just to, spite them. No, I'm actually seeing like genuine fans of the Fallout series saying, I didn't care for it. Others saying, it was pretty good. Some saying it was woke. Others people saying, it wasn't that woke. Like, a genuine disagreement that's not getting hostile or vicious, and that's kind of surprising. But I'm getting besides myself. How is Fallout? In my personal opinion, it's okie dokie. If you get the reference, you get the reference. Let's get into it.
I just want to start.
I've had a rough week. Practically every person I've met up here has tried to kill me.
I'm simply going to harvest your organs.
You need to go home. You come from a world of rules, of laws.
Yeah, I would say that, in my opinion, it wasn't terrible. It wasn't amazing. It was okie dokie. If you watch the series, you will understand what that means when I say okie dokie. I was kind of looking forward to this series for a while because it was one of the few gaming properties that I felt would be the perfect first thing for a studio to try and adapt in a serious attempt to do a live-action version of an established video game. And one of the reasons why I think Fallout was such a perfect show or perfect series to adapt into a show is because every chapter in the game series, whether it's comic books, novels, tabletop RPG, every chapter is its own self-contained story. And it's set at a different time, at different location, following a different group of characters with a different overall premise. The only thing the same are certain elements in the world, like factions, creatures, weapons, that kind of thing. And so, when doing a Fallout live action show or movie, you wouldn't have to try and adapt any of the established characters. You literally just make up new characters and not have to worry about, pissing off the fans. And when I heard they were making a Fallout series, I was kind of intrigued. And finally, it has released. Is this the greatest live action adaptation ever? No. Some fans have pointed out that there's some serious technical inaccuracies with other games in the series, because this, unlike other properties that take place in an alternate timeline, so we don't have... This actually said, no, this takes place in the same timeline as the games. And that was kind of refreshing. Now, I'm not a Fallout scholar or historian, so I can't tell you if what they did was inaccurate or not. But I feel, as a casual Fallout fan, that they hit the right notes with the right times. That doesn't mean I don't have criticisms of how they hit some of those notes, which I will get to in a little bit. One thing I will say that I was a little disappointed in, and it's silly, but I'm a little disappointed they didn't get Ron Perlman to do the opening intro monologue. I mean, I've heard the guy's been in the series, from at the very least 3. I've heard he did the opening monologue for 1 and 2 even. I'll have to check that out, but I mean, you always start off a Fallout game with Ron Perlman's legendary voice saying, war never changes. And honestly, how much do you think it would have cost to get him to do this show? Just a quick little monologue for this show. I mean, you probably could have bought the guy lunch and he might have said yes. And this is something I've been seeing on Twix, which is what I call Twitter/X. I call it Twix. That's been royally pissing me off. And that's people saying, I didn't like it all came out once. I wanted to wait a week in between each episode. If you see anyone talking like this online, don't listen to them, okay? Actually, just stay as far away from them as humanly possible, because they got a few screws loose, okay? That was one of the best aspects of this show, was that they released every episode on one day, and I didn't have to fucking wait a week in between every single episode. I mean, I would have had far more negative review on this show if I had to wait a week in between every single episode. So the fact that they released it all at once really helped them out in the long run. And I think it's getting a lot more positivity than it would have if it was released week by week. And unfortunately, Season 2 probably will be released week by week, and it will probably suck ass. Okay, I am so sick and tired of having to wait a week in between a 40-minute episode. It pisses me off, and it was so satisfying when I could just hit play, and when episode 1 was done, I could go right into episode 2. And then after that, I was able to go right into episode 3. And that was so satisfying. Now, one of the negatives about the show is the fact that it's not open to new people. Case in point, you're not going to want to watch this unless you have a Fallout fan watching it with you, because there are certain things that need to be explained that the show does not explain. Like case in point, the main currency in this world of Fallout are bottle caps. Do they ever explain this? No. And they mention bottle caps numerous times, but they never explain that that is the main currency. They also don't really explain what the Brotherhood of Steel is. If you weren't familiar with the games, you would think it's just a ragtag band of bullies that just impose their own law. And there's a little bit more to the Brotherhood of Steel than that. They don't really explain what ghouls are. I had to explain to someone what a ghoul was. And the unfortunate thing about the show is they had the perfect way to explain all this through the character of Lucy. Okay, Lucy, in writing terms, is like the perfect witch's cauldron. She's a kind of blueprint character you can do so that you can have a character that knows nothing, and in facto thereof, can have someone explain to the audience what's going on by explaining it to this character, in this case Lucy, what's going on. And so, like, she's the perfect archetype for that. She's this new character in this new world. She doesn't know what anything is. Perfect way of being able to give exposition to the audience without having it blatantly in their face. You have a brand new character to this world, and they don't capitalize on that. They have all this shit in this series that you wouldn't know what it was unless you had played the games and actually gotten a sense of the world through those. And because of that, this show kind of is only for Fallout fans, and it's not for newcomers. So some people that have never experienced Fallout before, they're going to watch this. It's like, it was okay. There was a bunch of stuff I didn't fully understand, and that's the problem. Okay? And ghouls are kind of important in this season, and they don't explain what ghouls are. It's like the problem with Season 1 of Halo. They never explained what the Covenant was. Okay? I had to explain that to people when watching Season 1. So that's a huge issue with this show. Don't watch it unless someone in your party is a Fallout fan that can explain shit to you. This leads into a potential spoiler that they may tell you. I'm not going to do spoilers here, but just keep in mind, there's a certain aspect of the show that they keep a mystery till the last couple of episodes. And this was an aspect that thankfully I did not spoil to the people that was watching this with me. But there was a few times I came close, like, yeah, by the way, if you did, just fun fact, this is this and this. Thankfully, I didn't do that because I was kind of seeing, like, are they going to make this a surprise? Aren't they? Are they? Aren't they? It seems like they're going to try and make that surprise, so I won't spoil that for them. But, I mean, if the show had done a competent job of explaining the world to people, this wouldn't be an issue. But because the show relies on Fallout fans to explain shit to the audience that hasn't experienced Fallout before, there's a very good chance that the Fallout fans might accidentally spoil this aspect that was designed to be a surprise in the season for the people who don't know anything about Fallout. And so that is a huge issue. That is a potential issue that you might run into if watching this with a Fallout fan, is they may very well spoil this aspect of the universe that was designed to be a surprise in this first season. Now, one thing I'm absolutely happy with is I've watched a lot of shows recently, and this is probably the first show in a long fucking time that was not trying to be Game of Thrones. And that is so refreshing. I cannot stress to you how stupid shows get when they try being Game of Thrones. There's only one of Game of Thrones, and that is called Game of Thrones. It's the worst aspect of Halo, to be completely honest. They're trying to do this Game of Thrones aspect, and it doesn't work. They tried doing Game of Thrones with Monarch Legacy of Monsters. It really did not work. I understand I haven't done a review on that yet. It is coming, but this took priority. And so, there were aspects of the show that could have immediately fell into the Game of Thrones trap. Like, this isn't really a spoiler. There's an election that happens in one of the Vaults partway through the series. They could have easily turned that entire episode into a Game of Thrones bullshit thing where this person's screwing over this person and this person's making alliance with this person so that they can screw over this person, all for power. And, you know, power is the ultimate evil of man. And thankfully they didn't do that shit in this. It was just, oh, election, here you go, the election happened, let's move on with the fucking story. Okay, so I was so happy that this show did not try doing Game of Thrones, because I am so sick of all the Game of Thrones knockoffs that I've been running into these days. So one of the things that I did like about this not being Game of Thrones is, for the most part, it only focused on 4 stories. 3 of which follow the 3 main characters of Lucy, Maximus, and the Ghoul, or also known as the Cowboy. And then the 4th story, which I won't tell you who it follows, kind of becomes more from its own thing as the show goes on. It kind of felt like just a side thing real quick, but then it kind of became its own thing. The 4th story is kind of like a mystery investigation type of thing, and that worked in my opinion. And then the other 3 stories following Lucy, Maximus, and the Ghoul. And yes, you did have some other like side stories that only were self-contained to like 1 episode, and I appreciate that. I like that the main focus was just on these 4 story arcs and nothing more beyond that. And because of that, this show had pretty solid pacing. I only had like a few moments where it's like, okay, can we kind of move on? And so probably this could have been 7 episodes instead of 8. Like, there was 1 episode, it's kind of a detour episode, but it does kind of help build the universe a little bit better. So probably they could have done a little bit of better writing in that specific episode. But for the most part, this thing clicked on at a pretty good pace, and I really appreciate that. A lot of shows drag on, so this one didn't do that. Another surprising thing that I found out is that, like, the actors, at least the actors that played Lucy and Maximus, they didn't do this bullshit where it's like, well, I didn't look at all into the games because I wanted to make this my own thing. You know, that dog shit that you heard from actors with The Last of Us and with Halo and all these other adaptations is like, yeah, no, fuck the fan base. We want to make this our own thing. They didn't do that with this. Okay, in interviews, the actor that played Maximus, I mean, he didn't play the games, but apparently he binge watched a shit ton of Twitch streams of people playing the Fallout games so he could have a better understanding of the universe. And then the actress that plays Lucy, she actually tried playing the games, and she started like focusing her character around like the progression of her character in the game she was playing. And it's like, wow, thank you, okay? Thank you to these 2 actors who actually gave a shit about the source material and actually tried to get themselves invested into this world. And you know what? It does kind of pay off on the screen. It does feel like these actors give a shit. And it does feel like they're giving their best performance they can in this show. It doesn't feel like a payday. It actually feels like they give a shit. And I would like to see this done more with other adaptations of comics, books, games, other movies, instead of this nonsense. Well, I didn't look at anything before because I wanted to make this my own thing. Anytime I hear that, I know the thing's going to be dog shit. And so the fact that these 2 actors did not do that is a breath of fresh air. Even Walter Goggins, although he didn't play the game or watch, you know, Twitch live streams, he said, yeah, I had my 13-year-old son fill me in because he's really big in the games. And so at the very least, that's better than, I didn't pay attention to any of the previous things because I wanted this to be my own thing. So, breath of fresh air, alright? Just absolutely happy that the actors did that. Now, in terms of the 3 main characters, the main character of Lucy, like, honestly, I had no problems with her. I mean, she comes off as this, like, you know, gullible, naive, you know, I don't want to say idiot, but, like, non-worldly person. And That's how her character was supposed to be. So I thought that worked for her. And slowly throughout the series, she starts becoming a little bit more experienced, a little bit more worldly, and by the end of the show, she's like at level 8 of, whereas the first episode she started level 1. Someone asked the question, what level do you think Lucy would be at in the game if she was to actually do that? And I thought, fair estimate would be 1 level every episode. So at this point, she's like at level 8 of, 30. So, she has a ways to go, but, definitely doing better than she did in the first episode. And, I totally see this actress and this character becoming like a fan favorite of the series, especially with some of the posters that have come out with her in the Vault jumpsuit. There's this one poster of her holding up a Nuka-Cola that just screams Fallout. I mean, that'd be an awesome poster to have on your wall. But I totally see her becoming a fan favorite, especially since she actually had some respect for the series and actually gave a damn and tried playing the games in preparation for this role. I am not going to drop that. I cannot stress how important it is to see more actors doing shit like that, instead of, oh yeah, I want to make this my own thing, so I'm not going to pay any attention to the previous source material. I'm going to piss all the fans off. I'm not familiar with the actress's name who plays Lucy, but I will actively seek out her other roles just out of respect that she tried studying up for this. Now, one of my biggest problems with this show was Maximus. And no, it's not because of anything the actor did, right? He did the best he could. It was with the writing of the character. You see, the character of Maximus, at times in the show, he's depicted as this seasoned, worldly, experienced survivor, and then a lot of the other times, he's depicted as this gullible idiot that can't help himself, and he's a helpless, child. He has the intellect of a child, and he kind of just has this dumb look on his face. And it's just, the writers could not stay consistent with this one character. And realistically, the only people who would realistically be gullible in this world would be Vault dwellers. Okay? Anyone who was born in this world, if they were gullible, they'd be dead before they were at the age of 10. Okay? This is a brutal, grueling, dog-eat-dog world. And anyone who survives to the age of 20 in it would be a seasoned veteran. And so the fact that he was coming off as this gullible, childlike innocence at times didn't work. I mean, it worked in one scene when he was starting to experience things that he had never experienced before in terms of niceties and accommodations. But I mean, apart from that, there were other times it just did not work, and it felt super inconsistent with me on that character. And I would like to have learned more about the Ghoul's past after the bombs fell. We found out a lot about his past before the bombs fell, but we barely got any of his past post-apocalypse. And that was kind of the more interesting aspect to the character for me. And so I would have liked to have seen more of that than his pre-war history, which was interesting, don't get me wrong, just would have liked a little bit more of the unknown than the known. Now, in terms of what I loved about this show, the faults were done perfectly.
I gotta tell you, it was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
Seriously, they nailed the look, the feel, the aesthetic, the vibe of the Vaults. And, bravo. I mean, from the dolls, to the nuts, to the suits, to the, common areas, the devices. They nailed, to a perfection, the Vaults. And, honestly, bravo. Just, hands down, bravo, guys. Another thing I really appreciate about the show is they did not cheap out on the budget. Unlike other shows like Halo, where it was very obvious they did not have the budget for this, with this show, it felt like they had the budget. And it did not feel like they cheaped out. Case in point, with the power armor, okay? First episode, you see the power armor, like, I had the sneaking suspicion that they were only going to show it once, and then they were going to have some bullshit excuse why you can't see the power armor anymore, and the rest of the series was just going to be, you know, people without it. And surprisingly, the power armor was in the entire series. I mean, yeah, they only have one suit for most of it, but first episode, you see numerous power armor being used, and it's impressive. They do a good job of not cheaping out on this show. There were a couple of things I saw where it's like, okay, that's not a 1950s aesthetic at all, but for the most part, they did a really good job making this feel like they didn't have to cut corners with the budget. And so when you're doing a science fiction like this, I'm glad that even if they didn't have the budget, they made sure to make it look like they did have the budget, and they cut corners, you know, in smart ways, and they didn't waste money on this show, at least from what I could see on the screen. Now, one of my criticisms of the show was kind of some of the things they did with the world of Fallout. Case in point, there are way too many trees in this world. Like, just way too many. With the few things I've played of Fallout, it's very clear that, like, trees are non-existent. There's barely any of them. The only places that there are trees are, like, West Virginia. There's, like, a little irradiated cove of mutated trees in DC. And then, like, you know, there's a couple other places. But for the most part, trees are non-existent. In this show, they're walking through lush forests at times. It doesn't look like this is a destroyed world. It looks like a world that was once destroyed, but is now on its way back. And I never got that impression from the games I played. It always felt to me like, this is hell. And there's no way back from hell. That was the impression I got from the games, and I didn't quite get that impression here with this show. I also felt that at times this wasn't brutal or dirty enough. Yes, there are some really graphic scenes in this show, and there are some really brutal scenes in this show. But there's other times I don't feel like it's brutal enough, and I didn't feel like it was dirty enough. Like, there's a scene where Lucy comes out all banged up, and, you know, she looks more war-weary than she did at the beginning of the episode. But the problem is, like, her clothing's still way too clean, and her skin is still way too clean. I mean, you play one of these games, people look like they've been living in squalor for years, and they just look like dog shit. And so the fact that a lot of people in this show don't quite look like that at times, it just threw me off a little bit. Same thing with the ghouls. The ghouls look way too clean. I'm more familiar with Fallout 3, where the ghouls look like Jeff Goldblum disintegrating into a fly, and he's juicy and melting. Like, that's how the ghouls should look. Instead, they look like humans that had their noses chopped off. And so, I mean, I get you wanted to not cover up Walter Goggins' face, because you want people to know it's Walter Goggins, but at the same time, yeah, that guy should have been a little bit more revolting to look at. I also would have liked to have seen more of the horrifying wildlife. As it is, we only get to see a couple things of the wildlife, and it's a bit lackluster. So I would like to have seen more of the nightmare fuel that is the wildlife in the games. Like, there's so much you don't see, probably for the best, because it'd be horrifying to see in live action, like giant ants. It sounds silly, but the giant ant story in Fallout 3 makes my spine shiver. And I'm not one of the easiest guys to scare. So, one of the things that really I did not like about this show, and I kind of started off the show talking about why I thought Fallout would be a great thing to adapt into a show or movie, is that the ending to this, while it's a okay place to stop, it's not a concluded story. They leave it open for a sequel with all of the characters. There's a couple of loose ends that don't get resolved, and it's very obvious that they want to do a second season to this story. And I don't like that, because every game in the series was its own self-contained story, and they should have done like an American Horror Story element, or more correctly, they should have done a Fargo thing with this, where each season is its own contained story, and the next season it might be connected in some ways, but it's a different story following a different group of people at a different time. And that's how they should have handled this show, and they don't do that. It's very clear they want to come back with the same characters as a direct follow-up to this season. And I personally feel that is a downside. Do I like these characters? Yes. But I think they should have stuck to their guns and had it a self-contained thing, so that next season you get a new batch of characters. In that season, let's say one of the characters is despised by people, you move on to a new batch of characters with the following season. Okay? Just each season is going to be its own self-contained story. And unfortunately, I don't think that's the route they're going with this. So, ultimately in the end, was this the worst video game adaptation I've ever seen? No. Was this the greatest? No. This is, as one of the characters likes to use this little catchphrase, okie dokie. It's not terrible, it's not amazing, it's kind of a little bit in the middle. And if you're probably thinking, well, this guy's just fence sitting. No, I hated Halo with a passion, so I do lean to the extremes on both sides. Just with Fallout, I was a little bit indifferent with it. There were some really great moments, there was some stupid moments, there was things that they perfectly captured in the show, there were things they didn't capture at all properly. And so just remember, if you do decide to watch this, watch it with someone who has played the games, so that they can fill you in on the crucial backstory that the show does not fill you in on. Anyway, that's been my review of Fallout Season 1. My name's Chris O'Connell with 11 Hour Reviews, and that will be all for today.